Thanks so much, Karen. Thanks, Steve and Frank and Jeff. I'd like to, very pleased to be able to address this meeting of the Robin Voss fan club. Okay? And I know you're all here, you're all enthused. I'm only going to mention two Wisconsin politicians today. One will be a Democrat, one will be a Republican, because I'm very bipartisan, you know that. But I just want to say the point with Robin Voss, he killed a bill that would have stopped Chinese ownership of land in the state. Okay? Now people say, well, it wasn't military land. That's not the point. The Chinese getting companies or land in your state gives them political influence because they have real estate agents in their pockets. They have suppliers in their pockets. They have local politicians. And Vanessa has written extensively on this in her home state of Indiana and other places, the Gautier factory, etc. Allowing China into your state is like allowing Nazi Germany or the mafia into your state. It is absolutely, that should disqualify that man from holding any public office, just that one thing alone. So, thank you. But I want to talk today about the Rainbow Coalition, the Chinese plan for influencing American politicians that goes back to the 1980s. Now, do you remember back in 1984, a man called Jesse Jackson ran for president on the Rainbow Coalition? And he ran again in 1988, and he got second in the Democratic primary in 1988, which was pretty darn good considering most people thought he was a fruitcake even then, okay? But he got there. And what the Rainbow Coalition was an idea he borrowed off the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers in Chicago said, we'll get the white leftists together with the black leftists and the brown leftists. We'll have a rainbow. Well, Jesse Jackson expanded that so you get the white leftists, the brown leftists, the black leftists, the yellow leftists, the lavender leftists, they were the gays, the greens were the environmentalists, and you have a rainbow. And this was his terminology, not mine. This was his terminology. Well, the whole Rainbow Coalition was run by Maoists from the Communist Workers' Party, the League of Revolutionary Struggle, the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, and Line of March. It was a Chinese operation back then. And the whole idea was America has minorities. And the class struggle doesn't work very well in America. The old Soviet model of the workers rising up to take the wealth of the capitalists didn't work in America. But America was very racially divided. So you're going to get a lot more traction playing off race than you will off class. So Jesse Jackson had the idea, you get the minorities together with the progressive whites and you can start getting electoral majorities. But in Jesse's day, the electoral minorities were about 19% of the population. Now they're close to 40%. So the idea was before its time. Well, in the 1980s, a lot of the Maoists started moving out of the factories and starting moving into the non-profits, into the Democratic Party, into business, into Wall Street, to gain access to the higher heights of America, the American economy. Hollywood, Wall Street, all of it. There was a big concerted, because a lot of young guys had become Maoists in the 60s with SDS, the anti-Vietnam War movement, etc. So in the 80s, they were moving on up, even into the churches. Well, one of them was a young man called Steve Phillips. He was a black revolutionary from Stanford University, a member of the League of Revolutionary Struggle, and he introduced Jesse Jackson at one of his main campaign rallies when he declared for the presidency. And he ran his West Coast student campaign in 1984 and 88. But in the 90s, he went into the Democratic Party. He also married into one of the richest families of America, the Sandler family of San Francisco, the Golden West savings and loan fortune. Golden West was bought by Wachovia, and it sent Wachovia broke. But anyway, they got $2 billion profit, and they put $1.3 billion of it into the progressive movement. And Steve Phillips was the man handing it all out. In 2005, he met with George Soros, Tom Steyer, and a whole bunch of other billionaires to set up the so-called Democracy Alliance. And this now doles out hundreds of millions of dollars a year to left-wing democratic causes, ballot initiatives, etc. They also set up ProPublica. They also set up the Center for American Progress, all with Sandler money. Now, one of the next things that Steve Phillips did, in 2008, he and his wife got $10 million together and did big voter registration drives in 17 southern states amongst black and Latino communities. And that $10 million is what got Barack Obama ahead of Hillary Clinton in the 2008 primary. Okay? Susan Sandler, Steve Phillips' wife, was the first big donor to Barack Obama because Barack Obama ran on the Rainbow Coalition strategy. Progressive whites, progressive blacks, progressive Latinos, progressive Asian Americans, progressive gays. You bring all the colours of the rainbow together. And it won. He won. Steve Phillips also put a whole bunch of money into the southern states. And he gave us people like Stacey Abrams from Georgia. This is the strategy. You run in the southern states, you run progressive candidates of colour, and you mobilise the low propensity voters in the south. We have burnt off our Midwestern base. The Democrats understand they've burnt off their union Midwestern base. So now they have to have two constituencies, the minorities of the South and illegal immigration, which tie in together. So they also backed Andrew Gillum, who almost won the governorship of Florida in 2018. Gillum and Stacey Abrams were both on Steve Phillips's board. They also gave us crybaby Cory Booker. Also gave you Mandela Barnes and Tony Evers as well, especially Mandela Barnes, very much part of this operation. But somebody else they gave you, and I'm sure this will not be a surprise. Steve Phillips at Stanford University was very close to a young woman called Kamala Harris, a young Maoist radical. And he was very friendly with her future husband, a man called Tony West. And he got Tony West put into the Justice Department at number 3 under Eric Holder. And Maya Harris, of course, was the sister of Kamala Harris. Now, Kamala Harris was raised in a Maoist family. Her father, Don, was a Marxist economist. Her mother, Shyamala Gopalan, was an Indian Marxist, an actual Marxist. When Kamala Harris was little, she used to go to a Marxist social club every Thursday night where they would listen to Maoist poets and revolutionary plays and, quiz nights and the whole shebang. But Shyamala and Don were both members of an organization called the Afro-American Association. That was the organization that spawned the Black Panther movement. The Black Panthers were Maoists. It's all about the racial division, using race instead of class to start a revolution. The head of the Afro-American Association was a man called Donald Warden, who changed his name to Khalil al-Mansour and became a sort of consigliere for a Saudi prince and started funding young candidates of colour and young promising Latinos and blacks all over the country. And it was Khalid al-Mansour who prevailed on Percy Sutton, the Manhattan Borough president, who was part of a Texas communist family, and helped Percy Sutton basically got a young Barack Obama into Harvard. So this is a network. What I'm talking is a Chinese-backed network which has been infiltrating American politics since the 1980s in a big, big way. So Kamala Harris goes to college where she's a Marxist there, goes back to San Francisco where she hooks up with Willie Brown. Now, you know, the big scandal was she's 29, he's 60, and he's still technically married, even though he'd been separated from his wife for 10 years. But that was the scandal. What should have been the scandal was that Willie Brown was then and still is a Marxist, a communist. He was put in power in the 50s in California by Terence Hallinan of the W.E. Du Bois Club, the youth wing of the Communist Party USA. And he was working with the Communist Party for 50 years, well after his relationship with Obama, with Harris had ended. He was also, he was part of the Rainbow Coalition again, very much part of that. And so he also worked with a young woman called Diane Goldman in the early 60s on Communist Party causes. You might know Diane Goldman later as Dianne Feinstein. And later on, Dianne Feinstein and Willie Brown worked together to bring China into San Francisco, to bring China into California. They were China's best friends. I don't know why Dianne Feinstein needed a Chinese spy working in her office for 20 years, just for backup, I suppose, just in case she was on holiday or vacation or something. But she got the Chinese into the World Trade Organization. She used to go to stay at Hu Jintao's house in Shanghai. She's completely in bed with the communists all the time while serving as the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Senate Intelligence Committee. And so this is the network that Kamala Harris comes from. Then Kamala Harris becomes district attorney from San Francisco, all with the backing of Steve Phillips and his communist groups. Then she becomes Attorney General of California, then US Senator, and then presidential candidate. I was saying in 2018 she would be at the top of the ticket. Not because I was prescient, because I read their stuff. Now, that's how this works on a local level. Remember when Virginia was really, really, really red? And then it went really, really blue. And it's sort of gone a little bit purple since. In 2007, a pro-Chinese communist group called Liberation Road, which is some of the old guys from the League of Revolutionary Struggle and the Maoists from the 70s, set up a group in Northern Virginia called New Virginia Majority. And they went out and they signed an orange T-shirt just like yours, sir. I know you. You're not part of their group, are you? New Virginia Majority, okay. Same colour, perfectly. And they went out and signed up 300,000 minority voters in Northern Virginia. And then they worked with Terry McAuliffe, the governor of Virginia, to sign pardons for 200,000 Virginia felons. And then they went out and signed all those felons up to vote. That 500,000 voting base is what they used to flip Virginia, all running on the Rainbow Coalition strategy. You get the minorities, you energize the minorities, you run candidates of colour. Well, the reason they were so efficient, they were using GIS computerized maps that could tell you every precinct in Virginia, where the minorities lived, where the Iranians lived, where the Khmers lived, where the Puerto Ricans lived, so they could send the right volunteers into the right households. Well, those maps were made and still are being made by a Liberation Road communist called Steve McClure, who's been making those maps, a graduate of the George Mason University Geography Department, who's been making those maps for the last 10 years, working from the geography department of Wuhan University, China. This network is the reason North Carolina has a Democratic governor. It is the reason there are two Marxists, and I have them in my book. Warnock and Ossoff are both Marxists. They're the reason Georgia has two Marxist senators. They're the reason Arizona has two far-left senators. They're the reason that Ted Cruz had to fight tooth and nail to beat a certified imbecile like Beto O'Rourke back in 2018. They are working the southern states and mobilizing minorities in a dedicated pattern. But they're not just doing it in the south. The Chinese consulate, which set up an organization called Asians for Black Lives, which basically ran Black Lives Matter, also set up an organization in 2018 called Seed the Vote. Now, Seed the Vote has a whole bunch of Maoist-run voter registration organizations in key cities that use Black Lives Matter and the minority populations to flip the big cities in key states to win statewide for the Democratic Party. And I'm talking about the Democratic Party here because the left is more attached to the Democratic Party than it is to the Republican Party. So this is just fact. So in Arizona, they had Lucha, which in 2020 made 1.8 million phone calls and knocked on 800,000 doors on that state. In Michigan, they had Detroit Action. In Georgia, they had the New Georgia Project. In Pennsylvania, they had Pennsylvania Stands Up. In, where else was it? Wisconsin. Black Leaders Organizing Communities, BLOC. Maoist group. They claim they won the election in 2020 for Biden-Harris. They flipped the 20,000 deficit and made a 20,000 surplus. They claim full credit for this. It is a Maoist-run voter registration organization working right in this city under your noses. And their goal is to, all those states I mentioned, they're all the key swing states, right? And they're also doing Nevada as well. They have got 6,000 volunteers from the Bay Area right now working in Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and Arizona. 6,000 volunteers from California Bay Area. Maoist Liberation Road supporters knocking on your doors in this state right now. And I'll tell you who's been one of the big beneficiaries. Somebody else who started out in the Rainbow Coalition. That's a young lady called Tammy Baldwin. Tammy Baldwin started her career in the Rainbow Coalition. They got her elected back in Dane County. And Democratic Socialists of America in Dane County, and that's all in my book here. I give you a whole background on Tammy Baldwin, how she got in power, how she's been working with the Marxists since the 1980s, and still is. So she piggybacked. Democratic Socialists of America ran Madison back in those days. So one of them would get a position, they'd stand down, and Tammy would take that position. Then another one would get a higher position, they would stand down, and Tammy would take that. But the most serious thing about Tammy Baldwin, and same with Mark Pocan, they are both long-time leaders of the Columbian Support Network. That's a network set up in Madison with help from people like Bernardine Dawn and Howard Zinn and other Marxists who are campaigning, where they worked heavily with Russ Feingold as well, who were campaigning to support the Colombian guerrillas, the FARC in Colombia, Latin America. And Tammy would go down there all the time, and she was always lobbying when she was a congresswoman to get US military aid cut off to Colombia. You can see her Stop the US aid to Colombia. Why? So the communists can take over. And we all know that the FARC are known as narco-terrorists because they make their money and buy their guns by selling cocaine to your kids. And Tammy Baldwin has been one of the biggest lobbyists for the Colombian revolutionary movement in your Congress for years. But how many people in Wisconsin have any idea of that? How many? Virtually zero. But it's all written up in here. Now, one thing I want to say before I finish, this is how we got to deal with these problems. We got a massive infiltration. We got a massive Chinese infiltration in the country, Iranian infiltration, Cuban, North Korean, Russian, cartel, globalist. All our problems basically stem from a massive foreign infiltration. We talk about the deep state. The deep state is Russia and China, people. The deep state is run from Moscow and Beijing. That's what it is. They control our institutions. So how do we deal with this? Well, we got another big problem. A slight lack of confidence in the voter integrity of the country, right? Am I being, can I say there's a slight lack of confidence on the Conservative side in our voter integrity? This is a civil rights issue. We are being denied fair representation. That's the avenue that we should be going down. But this is how we deal with it. There are two problems. You cannot deal with the voter irregularities. Maybe I can use the word irregularities. Is that all right? You cannot deal with the voter irregularities of Milwaukee from Wisconsin. You cannot deal with the voter irregularities in Chicago from Illinois. It has to be federal. We have to set up, as we have done in Florida, special units dedicated to preserving voter integrity, acting on complaints from the states where federal people go in and do RICO lawsuits against the big voter registration groups in the state. And you have to, what you do is shake the tree and you find a few low-level people and you catch them for stuffing a few ballots and you say you get 3 years or you tell us who paid you. Then you catch the next level up and you say you're going to get 10 years unless you tell us who organised this. And you go right up the tree. This is how you take down organised crime. You catch low-level rats, you give them immunity, and they rat out the people above them. That's how you take out mafia, the purple gang, or whatever. That has to be the way forward. But what do we do on a national level? The next president, and it probably won't be, I don't think Kamala would do this, the next president has to set up a new intelligence agency. And this can't be anybody from CIA or FBI. Maybe one, this has got to be people from police departments, from the IRS, from special forces, the best of the best, untouchable, totally vetted people. You interview 30,000 to get 1,000. And then that agency is set upon rooting out foreign infiltration. And then the president declares an amnesty. Every traitor in America has got 3 months to come forward. You either leave the country permanently or you come forward and spill your guts and tell us everything you've done, who's paid you, who you've paid, every single thing you know. And if you're still here at the end of 3 months and you haven't come forward, we're coming for you. And you'll get 40 years in Leavenworth. This is the carrot and the stick. A lot of people get involved in treachery. They get a business deal that they didn't quite understand. They get compromised. They get caught in bed with someone they shouldn't have been in bed with. They want out, but there's no way out. Give them a way out. Give them amnesty if they will come forward. And their punishment will be between them and God. But you will get so much evidence to take down those who are still left. And the whole foreign networks would just collapse. Every dirty Iranian businessman paying off a senator wouldn't know if the senator was wearing a wire, and the senator wouldn't know if the Iranian was wearing a wire. The whole trust of these networks would break down because they wouldn't know who'd taken the deal, who was going to rat them out. You would bring the foreign networks in this country to complete paralysis. Hundreds of thousands of foreign agents would leave the country, and who we would have left, we would have so much evidence, we could take them down, and we could show the American people finally how deep the penetration is, so that they would support the security measures going forward to make sure this does not happen again. And we've got to give rewards. You know, as Brian says, you put up $100,000. Your GOP should say this now. We'll put up $100,000 to anybody who can prove, can rat out vote fraud in this state that leads to a conviction. So all of these vote fraudsters would be thinking, who's going to take $100,000 to rat me out, and I'll get 3 years jail if I get caught? Maybe I shouldn't do it this election cycle. You do that on a nationwide scale, you would reduce that problem dramatically. If there was a real penalty and a reward for exposing that penalty, you would see some changes. But ultimately, we're not going to see this country saved until treason becomes an offence that is worth punishing, and that stealing your elections is an offence worth punishing. What is worse, stealing your car or stealing your children's future? You tell me. What deserves a longer jail term? And we wouldn't have to put many people in jail to stop this stone cold dead. So I want to thank you all for being patriots. I want to thank you. I expect great things out of Wisconsin this year. God bless America, and God bless the Badger State. Thank you.